young couple in the 70s. They escape from Russia. They come to America. And they're hoping to build a nice new life for themselves. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out the way they wanted. They face all kinds of challenges. Financially, they barely have anything to eat. They're actually going hungry. Nowhere to live. She gets pregnant. During pregnancy, she realizes there's no way I'm going to be able to raise this child. She has the baby, and the two of them drop off the baby at an orphanage. They give up the baby for adoption, and then they separate. They get divorced. His baby grows up, and he's literally going from orphanage to orphanage. In one of these terrible, terrible situations. Orphanage to orphanage, it's geferlich. Gets kicked out of one, kicked out of the next. Eventually, he's a teenager and just escapes altogether, leaves, and he's just living on the streets. Of course, how is he going to feed himself? What does he do? You got to steal. You got to be a survivor. So he starts stealing, and he's stealing, and he's stealing. And the stealing gets worse and worse and worse. Eventually to the point when he brings a weapon with him, and he does a bank robbery. Didn't turn out the way he wanted. And he gets caught. Gets caught. Police arrest him. And he's held on trial for multiple accounts of theft and for armed robbery. He's given a lawyer, can't afford one on his own. And it comes time for the trials. And the prosecuting attorney is a very well-known one. He was hired, a very successful prosecuting lawyer. And he begins to prosecute this guy. The jury's listening to the case back and forth. And the whole time, this defense attorney for this young man, we'll call him Michael, this defense attorney for Michael, he's not doing any defending arguments. He's barely defending the guy at all. Prosecuting attorney is ripping him to shreds. Jury's listening to the whole case. And everyone's wondering, what's going on? It became a famous case. Everyone's wondering, what's going on? Why is the defense attorney not doing anything? Eventually, the case is going on and on. Everyone already knows where this is going. The guy's finished. It comes time for the closing arguments for the defense attorney. He gets up, he turns to the jury, Your Honor. He said, I know many of you are wondering why I've been so quiet. Where have my defending arguments been? He said, but I'll tell you the truth. He said, everyone thinks my client was the one who did the armed robbery, when in fact, that's not true. The person who did this robbery escaped to Mexico. We found who he is, and I've arranged with the Mexican authorities to have him brought into our courtroom today between 3 and 4 o'clock. Police freaked out. What? So we're looking at the clock, waiting, clock ticking. Finally, clock gets to 3. And slowly, everyone starts, turning, waiting for the door. And they're waiting. 3, 3:05, 3:15, 3:30. At 3:30, the door opens. Everyone's head is staring at the door. And in walks one of the reporters who heard about this case. 3:45, 4 o'clock. Nobody comes in. Judge looks at the defense attorney. He says, what do you say now? He said, Your Honor, you're right. The actual robber didn't walk in. But I understand that in American law, in order to prosecute somebody, you need to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And when I told them that at 3:30, that man is going to walk through that door, the faces of everybody in this court was staring at that door. Which means, in all of your minds, including our jury, there was some belief that that man, my client, didn't actually do the bank robbery. Court was quiet. He says, okay, jury, time for deliberations. They break, jury goes through deliberations, they come back, say, okay, what's your verdict? Jury says, together we have decided that this man, Michael, is guilty of armed robbery. It was this, guilty? But how could it be? They said, Your Honor, it's true that everyone's faces were looking at that door. Everyone except for one. There was one person who didn't lift his head to look at that door, and that was Michael. And the reason he didn't look to see whether someone was going to walk in is because he knew that he's the one who did the armed robbery. Wow. Okay. So the judge is going to give the verdict. Going to be guilty. And Michael stands up. And he says, it's true, I didn't look at the door. It's true. But it's not because I knew that I did the robbery. He said, I didn't look at the door because when this whole case started happening, I realized I could spend many, many years of my life in prison. I started to rethink my life, to rethink where I was going. I started to think about where I came from. I started thinking about my whole life overall. I started thinking about my early years. I started to take life seriously. And I realized that I don't really know who I am, where I come from. So I got in touch with the orphanage that I was first dropped off at. I did DNA testing. And the reason I wasn't looking at the door is because I was looking at the judge, who's my dad. I knew he couldn't just find me guilty just like that. He knows my story. He knows what I went through. Our secret for Rosh Hashanah is to approach it like a child approaches a father.